Hello, Global Read Aloud classes. I'm Kate, and this is our first Marty McGuire video Q&A session. You guys have asked me a lot of questions, and so I'm going to get right to those, and I'll try to answer as many as I possibly can. I'm going to generally answer one question per class, so we can include everybody. The first question was one that a lot of people asked about. Maura Lunt and Mrs. Mockel's class at Rossford Elementary in Alberta, Canada. A homeschool family working with Mrs. Spalding in Lincoln, Nebraska. Cole Dixon, Mrs. Adams' third grade class at Chester Elementary in Lime Springs, Iowa. Mrs. McDonough's class and Ms. Kelly's class in Lanham, Maryland all want to know about the character Marty McGuire and where did she come from, and was I like Marty when I was a little girl? Well, the answer to that question is yes, I was a lot like Marty, and I still am a lot like Marty, but characters of mine are never based on just one person, so really, Marty is sort of a combination of a lot of kids I've met over the years. Mrs. Lackey's second grade bilingual class at J.A. Vitovsky Elementary in Midlothian, Texas, adds, where did that name Marty McGuire come from? Well, the name McGuire is a family name. My mom's father was named McGuire, and I always liked that name, and so I chose that, and I thought the name Marty sounded pretty cool with it. Miss Klipfer's first graders from Fuller Meadow Elementary School in Middleton, Massachusetts, ask, growing up, did you have a Veronica Grace in your life? Doesn't everybody? Think about it. You probably have somebody that's a little bit different from you that you struggle sometimes to get along with. I think everybody has a Veronica Grace in that way. The American International School of Muscat, Mrs. Bernhardt's class in Oman, says, hi, Kate, do you like frogs? Do you like princesses? Yes, and yes, I like frogs better than princesses, though. Mrs. Eaton's second graders at Elizabeth Scott Elementary in Chester, Virginia ask, how old were you when you started writing? And the truth is, I was probably about as old as those second graders, just about as old as you guys. I've had a writer's notebook that I've carried around ever since I was a kid. I've got one of them right here. The truth is, I don't always just have one writer's notebook. Usually I have 6 or 7, and they're all around the house, but that's something that I've done, and I've written stories since I was little. Let's see. Michaela, Eleanor, Ella, Brinner, Ellie, Harper, Renan, Nick, and James asked individual questions that seem to be all from the same class, so I'm going to choose one of those. How did that raccoon get into the attic? Well, the raccoon in Marty McGuire, Sparky, is actually based on a real raccoon that got into my neighbor's attic years ago. And my neighbor across the street so almost fell through the ceiling when he was up there trying to figure it out. He actually put his leg right through the ceiling. And so it was kind of a funny story for them. He didn't get hurt or anything. But that story always kind of stuck with me. I don't know how the raccoon got in. Maybe through the chimney or something like that. Another one here, second graders at Presbyterian Day School in Memphis, Tennessee, say, we'd like to know how you used your imagination to solve problems as the writer of this book. And that's a great question. One of the things that I do when I'm writing is I try to sort of sketch out how things are going to go. And let me just show you guys. These are actually some notes that I'm working on for a book I'm writing right now. But the whole time I'm writing, I'm scribbling notes about what I might change later on, and I kind of solve problems as I go. We have another second grade class from Hilton Elementary in Brecksville, Ohio, that asks, what do you like about being an author? Well, this room is work for me, and it's right downstairs in my house, so I get to go to work in my in my comfortable clothes and barefoot if I want, and I love that. And I also really love meeting readers like you guys. I just love to tell stories. Let's see, we've got Mrs. Delgado's second grade class in Grosse Pointe Woods, Michigan. Have you ever had a pet frog, and what made you decide to write about frogs? Well, I've never had a pet frog, but I've always sort of liked frogs. My family likes to go hiking, and we have this one pond that we really like to hike to. It's called Copperas Pond in the Adirondack Mountains. Tons of frogs there, and they're really fun to watch and catch. Let's see, we have Mrs. Dole's class in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We love your book. We plan to read the other Marty books. We are wondering how you thought to include Jane Goodall in your book. We can tell why Marty admires her, but we're wondering if you might have liked Jane Goodall when you were young. Well, the answer to that is yes. She's one of the people that I've always admired, I think because she wasn't afraid to do what interested her the most, even if it was something that girls traditionally didn't do at that time. So I still think Jane Goodall is pretty amazing. Mrs. Lowe's class, the fourth grade at J.W. Reason School in Hilliard, Ohio, and 19 second graders from Groveland, Massachusetts, the Can Do Kids, want to know, did you go through any of the experiences that you put in this book? Is it based on a real story? And the answer to that is lots of things in my books are based on real stories, including some tiny things that you probably wouldn't know. You remember Marty's pet lion? Not her pet lion, but her stuffed lion, Bob the lion. Well, Bob the lion was a real stuffed animal in my house when my son was little, and he was a gift from a neighbor, and poor Bob did get thrown up on once when somebody was sick, and we had to wash him and put him in the dryer, and then his mane came out all frizzy. So Bob is a story from my real life. Mrs. Postian's class from Wisconsin Lutheran School says, how many books have you written? Well, altogether, I've written more than 20. Some of them are not out yet because they're still being illustrated or they're still going through the revision process, but I can show you some of them. Besides the Marty McGuire books, I write mysteries for kids like Capture the Flag and Hide and Seek. I write some picture books. One of them is called Sea Monster and the Bossy Fish. And one of those is called Over and Under the Snow. It's about animals in winter. I have a new book that came out this fall for kids a little bit older than you guys called Wake Up Missing, kind of a scary book. And a number of other books that are, like I said, just at various stages in the process that won't be out for a few years. Mrs. Donahue's class in New Jersey says, why did you make the book about a play, and did you have to revise this story? And I thought those were really interesting questions to ask together because this book, when I wrote it the first time, was not about a play. The first draft of this book had Marty in the Nutcracker Ballet. And one of the things that I changed when I did my second draft was I changed that to a play. And I do an awful lot of revision no matter what book I'm working on. Most of my drafts look like this. See all the scribbles on there? This isn't the Marty McGuire book. This is actually one of my mysteries. But if you take a look at this, I do a draft and then I write on it and my editor writes on it, and there are lots and lots of changes that get made along the way. All right, Miss Crombie's grade 1-2 class in Beech Grove Elementary in Delta, British Columbia asks, have you ever caught a bullfrog? I have. At that pond I told you about that my family likes, we catch them very gently and study them and, look at their, their eyes and their ears. And truth be told, that's how I got some of the details for the Marty McGuire book. Mrs. Simmons' class asked about how Marty's mom caught Sparky with the noose in that one scene when Sparky had gotten out in the house. And that is a little bit hard to explain quickly in a video. So I'm actually on this blog post going to include a link to a website that does a better job explaining it than I can. It'll be down there. Mrs. Madonna and Mrs. Ryden's class ask, where did you meet Brian Floca? Now that's kind of an interesting question because before the Marty McGuire book was made, I had never met Brian Floca. I just wrote the words to the story and sent them to Scholastic, and it was Scholastic that chose Brian Floca to be the illustrator. And so I never met Brian until he was already working on those illustrations, and we both happened to be at the same conference where he was signing one of his other books called Moonshot, which I like a lot. And I went up to get a copy of Moonshot signed, and I was all excited, and I said, hi, we're going to be working on a book together, and that's how I met Brian. And I've gotten to see him at some other conferences since then. Mrs. Meister's fourth grade has our last question today. Will you continue making more sequels to Marty McGuire? Well, the truth is, one of the sequels to Marty McGuire is out already. It's called Marty McGuire Digs Worms. This is the second book, and this one is out now, so it might be in your library. And actually, if your teacher wants to do a book order, I do signed book orders for classes sometimes too, and there'll be an order form on the website, but check it out in the library. And there will be a third Marty McGuire book too. I can actually show you something kind of secret. That book looks like this right now. It's not exactly as finished and shiny, but if you take a look, that is what the title page will look like. Marty McGuire has too many pets. And this book comes out in January. So that was our first video Q&A. Thank you guys so much for the great questions, and we will see you back here next Friday. Keep reading.